16. Keith. I have no idea what I'm doing, Keith whispered, but it's going to be okay. He'd said those words to himself several dozen times since he'd fled Elwyn's house. And now he was saying them again to a tiny, caged imp who narrowed his watery green eyes, looking about as dubious as Keith felt. Trust me, this will be your best look yet, you'll see, he promised, keeping his voice extra soft in case his new ability worked on furry creatures. Plus, it'd be super bad if he got caught sneaking into Foster's room and messing with her pet. Just give this a little drinky drink for me, and let the awesomeness happen. He pressed a vial against Iggy's lips, and the feisty imp unleashed a cage-rattling fart to punish him. But he also slurped down the thick syrup, a mix of 5 different elixirs, which Keith had concocted from one of his prank stashes during the quick stop he'd made at the shores of Solace. Thankfully, Daddy Dearest hadn't been home, so he'd been able to grab the final thing he needed and get away without any drama. Oh, it's working, what did I tell you? Keith scratched Iggy's fuzzy cheeks, filling the room with the sound of squeaky purring as Iggy's fluffy fur slowly changed colors, green in some patches, blue and purple in others. Some spots even merged into a soft teal tone, which made Keith want to roll his eyes and grumble about Fitzfee. But Foster would love it. And honestly, he hoped Fitz would step up and become whoever and whatever she needed him to be. She deserved that. She deserved to be happy. Huh? That's unexpected, he said as tiny black tiger stripes streaked across Iggy's body. Keith wasn't sure which of the elixirs had caused something like that. He'd just thrown his favorites together, trying to create something memorable. At least he'd gotten that right. You look fabulous, he assured Iggy. I'm definitely going to win the prize for Best Imp Stylist. Not that he'd be around to claim his victory, or to see Foster's reaction. But that was probably better, since a colorful, stripy imp wasn't the only surprise he was leaving for her. He pulled the letter he'd written from his pocket and carried Iggy's cage over to the giant canopied bed, setting both on the pillow so there was no way anyone would miss them. His brain kept screaming at him to tear the letter up and rewrite it. But there was no time for that. Plus, it was better to be honest, wasn't it? If you chew this, he warned, showing Iggy the crinkled envelope, I will shave you bald, you hear me? Iggy burped in his face. I'll take that as a yes. But just to be extra safe, he slid the cage on top of the letter to weigh it down. And that was it. There was nothing left for him to do. Except leave. Bite anyone who tries to hurt her, okay, he told Iggy. Or better yet, just fart in their face. Iggy burped again, making the room smell like rotting umber leaves. Keith gagged. Burping works too. Just take care of her. He might have been imagining it, but he could have sworn the tiny imp nodded. Thanks, he whispered. And now he was definitely stalling, so it was time to go. But his legs wouldn't cooperate. Or they wouldn't until a familiar voice behind him said, Keith. Then Keith was ready to smash a Keith-shaped hole through the wall. Instead, he squared his shoulders and forced himself to turn and face Sophie's adoptive father, who looked extra murder. Why, what are you doing in my house, in my daughter's room, without permission? Grady demanded, which made it pretty clear the conversation was not going to go well. Keith couldn't risk using his voice, so he shrugged and pointed at Iggy's cage, wiggling his hands like, "Ta-da, fancy new imp colors." That's right, I heard you aren't talking now. Grady's eyes focused on the sealed envelope with Sophie's name written across it. Is that what the letter's for? Trying to keep in touch. Nodding would have been easier. Grady probably would have dropped the subject. But for some reason, Keith shook his head. Grady sighed. Yeah. I was afraid of that. And I'm guessing I don't want to know what you wrote in there. That time Keith definitely nodded. Grady's jaw tightened and his teeth made a painful grinding sound when he took a longer look at Keith, focusing on Keith's backpack. Going somewhere? Keith nodded again. For how long? Keith shrugged. However long it took for all of this to be over. That time Grady's sigh sounded more like a growl. You tried this already, remember? And it was a total disaster. So why don't you do everyone a favor and tear that letter up, go home, and not do whatever you're planning? We'll say you came here to change Iggy's color and that's it. Deal. He held out his hand for Keith to shake, and Keith really wished he could take it. But he backed a step away, trying to think of some combination of gestures that would explain why this plan was way different from the last one. Look, Grady told him, stalking closer and grabbing Keith's shoulders. I'm sure you think you're doing the right thing, but you're not. This is not the time to run off and do something reckless. I know, Keith whispered, deciding to risk using the two tiny words. He wanted to say so much more, but he could feel Grady's emotions swirling, a whole lot of stinging anger and bitter frustration, and didn't trust his voice to stay even. Grady shook his head and dropped his hands. You don't understand, Keith. Everything's about to get really messy. Sophie burned down the never-seen storehouse today. Keith's eyebrows shot up so high, they felt like they were stretching his face. Yeah, Grady said quietly. Apparently she gets in even more trouble without you there. Who knew? Keith's lips pulled into a smile, even though it really wasn't funny. He closed his eyes, taking several calming breaths before chancing one quick question. Is she okay? For now. Grady made his way over to the bed and sank down on the edge, looking more exhausted than Keith had ever seen him, when he added, I'm sure it won't be long before the never-seen retaliate. And I have a horrible feeling it'll be their cruelest attack yet. Sanders working on new security strategies, but you and I both know how stubborn Sophie can be about that kind of thing. And, honestly, as much as I don't understand your friendship, she does listen to you sometimes. And rely on you. And I think she's going to need you for this next part. Keith wasn't sure that was true. But Grady had to be pretty desperate to tell him that. In fact, he could feel Grady's worry hanging over them like heavy storm clouds. It made him want to shred that letter and run back to Elwyn's and tell Ro, just kidding, don't be mad. But he was right this time. He could feel it. I really have to go, he whispered. Grady closed his eyes. I'm not going to pretend like I know what you're going through, he told Keith. But I do know what it's like to have a daunting power. And I respect how hard you're fighting to get control. You just need to believe in yourself. You will figure this out, with time and training and practice. And Keith grabbed Grady's arm, waiting for him to look at him before he shook his head. I have to go, he said, risking that tiny bit of emphasis. I'm sorry. I wish. There were so many ways he wanted to finish that sentence, so many hopes and dreams and fears and frustrations. But he kept them all to himself. None of them were options anymore. He had one choice left. And he had to make it. No matter what it cost him. Grady tilted his head to study him, like he was trying to solve a riddle. He must have found some sort of answer, because he stood and said, okay. If that's what you need to do, I'm not going to stop you. Keith nodded, feeling his chest tighten and his eyes burn as reached into his pocket for his pathfinder. He had to get out of there before he broke down crying. But Grady put a hand on his shoulder. Wait, I need you to take this with you. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his imparter. I promise, I'll only use it for an emergency. I have a feeling Sophie's going to need you before this is all over. So please, keep it in your pocket and swear to me that you'll answer if I hail you. Keith swallowed hard, clearing his throat several times to make sure the words were a request, not a command, before he said, You can't tell Foster you have a way to reach me. I won't tell anyone, Grady promised. Keith nodded, grabbing the imparter and shoving it into his pocket as Grady's words replayed in his head. Sophie's going to need you. He didn't think she would. He knew she would keep right on being her brave, powerful, awesome self and show his mom why the Moonlark would always be better and smarter and stronger than anyone else. Thank you, Grady said, giving Keith's arm a gentle squeeze before letting him go. Keith took one last look around the room, and when he got to Iggy's cage and the letter underneath, he realized he'd reached another point of no return. He'd had a lot of those in his life, but this was a big one. And the right one. He just had to be brave. Take care of yourself, Grady told him as Keith pulled out the Pathfinder he'd stolen from his dad. And it was obvious that Grady noticed that the crystal was cobalt blue. I'll try, Keith promised. It was the best he could do. Then he stepped into the path and let the blue light carry him far away. To the mysterious Miss F. Ugh, I'm already regretting starting this letter that way. But I don't have any extra paper, and crossing it out would look worse, so I guess we'll just have to add it to my list of mistakes. And I know you're going to think that everything I'm about to say should also be on that long list of key fails. But I swear that's not what this is. I'm not trying to fix everything or save everyone this time. I'm just trying to make sure I don't hurt anyone. I can't tell you more than that without putting you in danger, so just trust me when I say that the powers my mom gave me are super bad. There seriously aren't strong enough words to explain how horrible they are. And I can't control them, just like I can't stop my mom from forcing me to use them. So, this is the only way. I don't want to do it, but I have to. And I'm not going to ask you not to hate me. In fact, it might be better if you do, because I need you to promise that you won't try to find me. My mom will be waiting for you to track me down, and since I know how stubborn you are, I want to make sure you understand who you'd be putting in danger. I'm going to be hiding the same way the Black Swan hid you. That's why you have to stay away. Well, there are lots of reasons. So again, please, just trust me, okay? And since this is the last time I'll ever talk to you, I want to say that I'm really going to miss you. You mean a lot to me, Foster. More than you'll ever know. Please be careful. Please be happy. And please forget all about me. It'll be better for everyone that way. You'll see. Love, Keith.